High school football fans in the North Florida area, welcome to another edition of the Extra Point. I'm Mark Adams, and I'm doing my tag team partner today, Andrew Jupe. And it's playoff time in the state of Florida. We've waited for it for 11 long weeks, and it's finally here. We are on the cusp of the end of the regular season, and this is the most exciting time of year. I would say that across every kind of sports brand that there is. Hockey has started. The World Series just wrapped up. We're in the middle of, I just saw Wemby play for the Spurs. That was kind of fun to watch. So this is kind of like a good time to be a sports fan right here. And at the 1st of November, I still got some Halloween candy sitting on my desk. So I'm excited. Juke, we have so many playoff teams from this area that we cover, going back from Lake City all the way down through the Panama City area. And it's just kind of loaded from top to bottom. I tried to count. I think I lost count after 32 teams from this area that have a shot at the postseason. And one of the things that I'm really, really excited about is just the parity. So many good teams are going to get a chance to play their best football against the best. And you and I were kind of chopping it up earlier. We kind of gave our opinions about the playoff system, and there's some oddities to it, but I think we're going to get some good football.
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. That's the thing is a lot of times, some of these fringe teams, you're going to get some rough deals, just like you see year to year on average. You'll miss out on other times. You'll get in when maybe, you shouldn't have been. But it's a fun time of year to see everything, the culmination of what has been, even going back to the off season, right? Now
Mhm.
everything coming to a spearhead. You've got your district champions, you've got your bragging rights here, but then also you've got these wild cards. Maybe there's a team that's catching fire late here in the season. Thinking maybe a JP2 team comes to mind, winners of their last four, trying to sneak in here, maybe a potential to wreck shop in a region, which, maybe 4 or 5 weeks ago, they weren't anticipated to do so. It'll be really exciting. We've got a bunch of area teams, Mark, like you said, that are going to be doing some damage here in November. And hopefully we see them over in Bragg here in town, Mark, uh,
Yeah,
December.
that's going to be super exciting. I'm really elated to be able to watch the best of the best. The last time, uh, being able to and nothing wrong with Gene Cox, nice intimate venue, but being able to play, on a campus like that, in the college venue, just adds a little bit more excitement. Fans that really travel well will have an opportunity to root for their teams with plenty of space and room to spread out. You get some good crowds. So let's go ahead and jump into it. Let's start off with the the one rural classification, and really just looking at it, I it's just hard for me to like pick somebody else, but Bozeman really looks like the dominant team across the entire one rural classification. I love the Bucks, love what they've been able to do for the regular season, and they are arguably one of the most dangerous teams right now. I would be pretty, I would be, pretty afraid to face them right now in the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. They've been on a team on everybody's radar, Mark, getting everybody's best shot. They're able to survive, and this region is absolutely loaded. You talk about Bozeman not only taking the top seat currently, kind of in their own real estate right now, but then you've got Holmes County and Chipley. Those three teams arguably could be top five as opposed, when you look at a human ranking or kind of the pedigree and what you've seen this season, they could be three of the top five here in the state, and they're all loaded in the same region. It's going to be some really fun matchups getting into the next couple weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I do like is just that these schools, when you look at Chipley and Holmes County, they're like maybe 25 minutes apart.
Mhm.
There's a history there that goes back, almost 100 years as far as like just football is concerned. And, it's one of those things where that come round two or round three, this is a matchup that you're going to see. One of these three teams is going to be gunning to take the other out. And it just makes it exciting for us as fans. But I know for the guys, this is just one of those things where it's just like, okay, it's your close proximity. I know a lot of these kids know each other, but come that game week, a lot of text messages are going to go unanswered, a lot of DMs going to go unresponded to because it's going to be time to lock in, and that's what I love about the Panhandle, small town football. everybody shows out, and this is going to be probably one of the greatest atmospheres to watch a first or second round game in the state. Also on that fringe right there at number 6 spot is Freeport. According to the model right now, and looking at the numbers, they're right there in that number 6 spots, followed by Baker, Vernon, and Graceville. And when I look at region number 1, it really, this is kind of where the heavyweights are, where we've seen a lot of the best football being played. Not to throw any shade to region 2 or region 3, which we'll get to in just a moment, but we've seen just so much of most of these teams here. I think collectively between the top 3, there's only 4 losses. And given the fact that all 3 schools have played 30 games and there's only 4 losses between those 3 schools, that kind of is a really big testament to the brand of football that those top 3 have.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talk about one of the losses, they played each other, Mark. One of Holmes
Yep.
County losses falling to Bozeman. So, if it wasn't for that head-to-head game, they may be all undefeated almost. So, yeah, it's going to be really competitive. And that 6 to really, when you look at it, that 5 slot all the way down to that 8 slot, when you throw Northview, Freeport, Baker, Vernon, anybody's game there, the way how volatile the points are this year, Mark, you could see any of those teams switching positions. So, all those teams, nobody's safe on the bottom half of this region
No,
either.
absolutely not. And I think the longer we stay in this system, coaches are going to be really mindful on who they put in that last spot at the end of the year, because not only do you want to be healthy, you don't want to kind of get got at the end of the year and somebody sneak and kind of take your spot. So it'll be interesting as we move forward. Let's go ahead and jump into the one rural region 2, which is really right down the road, because that starts off with Bluntstown, Osceola Christian, Port St. Joe, Cottondale, Sneeds, and Weewa are the top 6 in that order, respectively. Liberty County, Jefferson County, and Franklin County on the outside looking in. And this is not bad either. Looking at what Bluntstown has been able to do, they've been right there in the thick of things. They have already played most of the teams in Region 1 coming out of Region 2. So they have an opportunity to see some of those teams again. So has Port St. Joe, and so has Cottondale. And so that kind of makes things really, really interesting when you throw Sneeds into the mix. And I think Weewa Hitchcock picked up a couple of key victories here down the stretch. So it's not that it's anybody's game. I definitely like Bluntstown as one of the heavyweights coming out of Region 2. But I think the thing that the secret ingredient in all of this is Osceola, because they have not crossed over the capital city to play these teams as much this year, and they're a little bit of enigma. So I'm not sure. Bluntstown has had a couple of Georgia opponents, but Osceola Christian has had their schedule almost. I think they played 3 or 4 opponents from the Peach State. And so we'll see if that'll help or hurt them come playoff time.
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. So that's the thing when you're trying to make rankings or trying to compare losses, strength of schedule, all that stuff. The greatest ally is having common opponents, but Osceola basically has common opponents with no one. So it's really impossible to test where they are in the line. These other teams, like you said, Bluntstown has kind of separated themselves and survived through the gauntlet here. But really, when you look at it, we still don't know here in week 11 who Osceola is, Mark. So we're going to throw them into the mix. They have a chance for a first round bye, and then we'll see what happens, man. It's been wild. You think even last week when Sneeds went and upset Port St. Joe, Sneeds was on the outside looking in, and now all of a sudden they look pretty good there at that 5 seed. So, I mean, Region 2 is going to be wild, loaded with all of our area teams here, and it'll be really fun.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to it. I definitely don't want to sleep on region number 2. It's just kind of been one of those things where when you have kind of like, that one opponent that hasn't been as visible, it kind of makes things really, really interesting. So let's go ahead and move down to region number 3 here, where we have Madison County, which don't look now, but Madison is number 44 in the entire state. And that's just one of those things where it's just like the Cowboys, after the departure of Coach, like they've been really kind of embattled, but they have not fallen off like people thought they would have. It looks like they have kept up with their, playing opponents that are outside of their classification and still beating them. So looking at now, they're 6-1. with one game left to play. That will kind of round their schedule out with an even 8 games. But the model likes them, and they're followed up by Fort White, Union County out of Lake Butler, Lafayette, Mayo, Branford, and Hilliard round out that region number 3. And anybody will tell you, you just don't sleep on Madison County football. I expect to see them as a third round team. We'll see what they can do going beyond that point. But I definitely like them coming out of the bottom half of that bracket. And it's a little weird because down in Region 4, you have teams like Pahokee, you have teams like Williston that have really, really made a name for themselves this season as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So that'll make it interesting. Of course, they're one of our teams that gets scooped into Region 3, right? But yeah, Madison had a little bit of blip on the radar last year. And then, anytime you have a rough season, you accumulate some doubters, right, Mark? But I think they've shown
Mhm.
that, hey, we're going to withstand the test of time. We've been here for decades and we're going to keep on keeping on. They bounce back. You saw the head to head, of course, the quality that they bring to the table. You match
Mhm.
up with some of our area schools and you saw how they challenged Florida High. So I think
Yeah.
Madison County here is back to where they think, or we think, and they think they should be. They're going to be fun to watch. It looks like they've all but locked up a first round bye here in that Region 3.
Yeah, absolutely. And then of course there's Boot Hill, which is one of the toughest places to play in the state. Definitely look at how the regions in the one rural classification stack up. And that is where I probably will be spending most of my time keeping my eyeballs on those games because that's just going to be really fun to watch. So many teams from our area are going to have a shot at being able to play and brag. And I'm looking forward to that one, arguably the most. Another one I have my eye on list as we move on through the list is as we jump into the 1 suburban classification, as it were. Uh, Pretty simple, nothing complicated here, as I believe it's the top 6 teams again, similar to the one rural classification. But in Region 1, we have North Florida Christian and John Paul. You can take John Paul's record and throw it out the window. uh, they have done what is necessary, I think, beating the opponents down the stretch to be able to kind of even out their strength of schedule. And I think the model likes them a little bit. They're followed by McClay and Monroe, and then Rocky Bayou and FAMU DRS on the outside looking in. Uh, and you really kind of, you want parity, but the Region 1 here, and I would just say across the board in the entire 1S classification, it's pretty spread out pretty far. You're going to get your teams that have done what's necessary. They're going to have a first round bye, and then they might be getting on the bus depending on who gets that home game in the second and third round.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is a wild one too, of course, only taking 4 teams a region. So just then things kind of shrink up, make you a little more antsy about it. But yeah, I think what we see here, NFC JP2, winning their districts, taking care of business. And also you wonder if these rankings, you talked about how the model likes St. John Paul II, Mark, maybe there's some kind of heat check points because a lot of people ruled St. JP2 out 4 weeks ago when they were 0-5, but they've ripped off 4
Right.
straight. And if they go knock down Pensacola Catholic on the road this week, it will be very wild. And I think they've set themselves up to make some noise here. And I think it's looking like a regional final with them in NFC. But I wish we could kind of stir the pot a little bit and kind of go cross region before we get to the Final Four, because I would love to see a potential matchup down the road of JP2 and let's say Walton or Wakulla going at it for a rematch of that game, Mark. But yeah, this is going to be interesting.
Mhm.
And then, of course, that last team in, Monroe and Rocky Bayou, there's a 3+ point differential, but
Mhm.
with the weighting so reliant on the record, if Rocky Bayou is off this week, but if Monroe loses to go to 1-9, Mark, I think they could be at risk of Rocky Bayou getting jumped.
Yeah.
So be very careful for them here as we go into the final week.
Yeah, I'm gonna need a calculator to keep up with all of this because those points are very much there. It's that close together. So this is definitely going to be a one of our curveballs as it were, in terms of being able to look out for which teams have the edge and who's going to be able to get in. But it'll be very interesting where these teams fall seeding wise on Sunday when the FHSAA releases their brackets. So let's go ahead and move down to the 2S suburban classification. And this is where I would call this is just murderer's row right here.
Yeah.
Walton, Wakulla, and Florida High. Those are your top three. And I could keep going, but why? You kind of don't really get better than that. And just for added flavor, if you go down to number 6, there's Gadsden County, and mixed somewhere in there is Suwannee, Marietta, and then rounding it out with South Walton. South Walton would be coming in at number 8, but they're a district champion, so they've got the automatic lock here. Once you get to the 2S classifications, you've got district champions, and those get the automatic locks. Not really getting there won't be any teams with the first round bye, but you will get plenty of football right out the gate, especially looking at how top loaded this is, especially in this region right here.
Yeah, it's going to be wild. Obviously, you talked about the 3 district champs, Walton, Wakulla, Florida High, could take anybody, it seems, here in the suburban classification. But then you have a matchup here with South Walton. So, of course, you don't have what you've had in the previous years where you win your district that, you're guaranteed a top 4 seed here. So there's a weird situation that South Walton might have to travel here to
Mhm.
Florida High, I believe, or like Walton. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, but I think just because you win your district does not guarantee you one of those top seeds. So it could get really wild. As far as us, Gadsden County, they look pretty secure as far as the points go, but with the gap between Godby and Marietta, obviously Godby holds the head-to-head against Marietta,
Yeah.
but they could still catch them. They've got a matchup with 2-7 Milton, and then Marietta has to play South Walton. So, you could very easily see Marietta dropping to South Walton, who's looked fantastic this year, and then Godby maybe making the jump and breaking those 2.5 points to be able to jump into the postseason with a 4-5 record. I think that's definitely on the table here in this region, in Region 1 of 2S.
Yeah, definitely don't close the chapter on this book here. Everything hasn't been written yet. There's so much left that can still matter. And I know Coach Jones has definitely had his eyes on the numbers, understanding how important this last game could be for the Cougars. But I'm sorry. I would hate to have to host a Gadsden County team that's kind of hitting their stride right now. They're dangerous defensively, and I think they could definitely any one of these teams that ends up drawing them in a potential matchup, they're going to have their hands full because Gadsden County, the Jags have pushed everybody to the wire so far this season.
Yeah, absolutely. So that'll be wild too, because you could see them jump up into a 5 spot, and you have a Gadsden County Pensacola Catholic potential matchup here, Mark. As I know
Mhm.
we're kind of throwing dice here of what could be. With Suwannee going to undefeated Bradford, and then Gadsden County, of course, being in the area they play Gateway, who has 0 wins on the season. So just looking at that, we could see some really wild matches. But this is absolutely loaded. You look at this top 6. I
Mhm.
think there's only about 10 losses combined for your top 16, 10 or 12. Looking at it here quickly on my little spreadsheets here, Mark. It's going to be some fun football. This may be the most entertaining region in the state.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't take my eyes off of how just top loaded this is, and this is where I'm going to be spending almost just as much time looking at this region as I am for the 1A rural. So let's go ahead and look at 3S suburban classification. And some familiar faces here. I am used to seeing the Yellow Jackets from St. Augustine putting out a good brand of football. I'm used to seeing Lincoln. I'm used to seeing Pine Forest. I'm used to seeing Lake City, Columbia. This looks very normal to me. So you have your top 4, and then you also have in that number 3 slot, you have Choctaw, which I had a chance to see them against a couple of our local area teams earlier in the season. And this looks pretty much like what I would call a standard, Florida State playoff bracket. These are teams that are pretty much kind of like the blue bloods. they've been year in and year out. These are your top teams, and I look at Lincoln and really what they've been able to do this year. It's kind of where don't really pay attention to those rankings, those numbers. Just look at how their defense plays, and I think they match up very well in this region with several of the teams in the top 8 here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Lincoln plays a fantastic brand of football, and especially this time of year, Mark, when you have a solid defense, you're going to be in
Mhm,
ball games. And then if you can let your offensive playmakers go long enough, keep you in the game, then you only need one break to break this thing open. We saw that in the one-score game against Charles, which are arguably our two best defenses going at it last week. Lincoln
mhm,
survived the gauntlet. If not for undefeated Wakulla, who I think is stealing a lot of glory this year, not undeservedly so, obviously a fantastic year, but the one loss with Lincoln, I think they're rarely flying under the radar. They're going to be a super dangerous team come here to the flying finish, but this is going to be a wild bracket. You could see them even make the jump up to the 1 seed here, Mark, in
mhm.
the region, because that Florida High game is going to carry a lot of weight. If they could go 9-1 with that win over Florida High, you also talk about a pace team, which is going to be at 7 or 8 wins. Lincoln,
Yeah.
bona fide shot at the #1 overall seed, and if they could host all the way through this brutal region, not have to travel to Escambia out west or out
How
west
valuable
of
is that gonna
Jacksonville,
be?
that'd be super valuable, or going all the way to St. Augustine. That's farther. A lot of people say it's Jacksonville, but that's almost twice
No.
as far as Jacksonville. You gotta add another hour, hour and a half, man. If you could stay out of there and stay at home at the Gene and take care of business, I think there's very few teams in, the playoff scenario here for R specifically that would benefit from a home, automatic hosting all the way through the region like Lincoln would, and it would be a huge payoff for them.
Yeah, absolutely. When I take a look at this, I do not want to see St. Augustine at their place. I would love to be able to use some of that Trojan magic, as I've called it, for years, right here at home in the capital city, and to definitely be able to, have that ability to host and kind of keep, kind of keep my guys from getting on that bus, because St. Augustine is a hard one of the roughest places to play in the state, but this is going to be entertaining as well. I'm definitely looking forward to watching Lake City, Columbia as well. This is a team that very quietly went about their business down the stretch, picking up a couple of key victories and making sure that they locked up the district championship. So we'll be seeing a little bit of each team kind of progress as far as their defenses go. Their St. Augustine has one of the top defenses in the state. So does Lincoln, and so does Lake City, Columbia. And this will be for me. This will be something I'll be keeping my eye on as we move throughout. We get down to the 4S suburban class, and we got some teams right here in the capital city that got some work to do, and then we've got some teams that have made it, pretty much past the gauntlet and locked up their district. Most notably being Mosley out of Panama City, and the Dolphins really took a couple of L's in the regular season, dropping a couple of those to Charles and I believe Leon, respectively. Um, and really, when you look at how valuable a district championship is, that's one of those where I don't know. I think this scenario will be absolutely flipped if they had not won their district. So uh Childs is right there on the bubble. And we talked about this, just looking at how, if the ball bounces a certain way, there might be a shot for them.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, Mark. I think it's definitely on the table. It's not like you need an insane amount of things to happen for Charles to get in. They're right on the outside looking in. We didn't talk about Rickards in 3S, but even though Rickards is a couple spots down, they have a chance at it too. But staying back
Yeah,
here,
I was wondering how the math worked out on that one.
yes. Yeah, absolutely, especially when you factor in, and I know we're kinda going back in time, right? But Rick, they're only about 2 points off of Middleburg, and then you talk about the Matanzas-Middleburg situation. They have a couple tough games going on, so I think Matanzas should be okay, but Middleburg is playing Fernandina Beach. They could get caught, and then you
Mhm.
talk about some of the other teams, ahead of them, Menendez also, they have to play a tough Yulee team, and Rick, if they beat Madison County, Rickards would
That
get
would
in.
be monumental for them.
Absolutely, and Madison County would give them a lot of points and bring in that threshold of all those other teams. You talk about Madison County only having one loss. Madison County's also beaten Columbia. When you talk about
Hmm.
strength of schedule and you break out those tertiary layers that Max Preps is using for these insane numbers that they put
Yeah,
out, of course, and then you get Florida High into the mix, who's also a Madison County opponent as well. So once you get these big dogs, it's not unrealistic to make a 4-point jump here.
right.
These numbers are so volatile. So, I'm trying to do some predictions, and I think Rickards, if they win, of course, you got to beat Madison to have any shot, right? But if they win, I think they have a very good chance, and I think they could surprise some people, and some people could be very angry. But that is one that if I was on the FHSA committee, I would be looking at, because that could be a serious jump that will surprise a lot of those First Coast teams.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely been the kind of scenario where you look at how so many different teams, especially in the very last week of the regular season, have to play their rivals, have to play certain opponents, and those points got to go somewhere. And so a lot of these teams are like, why not us? And I know Coach Lewis over there at Rickers is like, hey, we're going to win and we're going to see what happens. We're going to do our best to try and nab this victory and see what happens. And I know, and especially for Coach Reagans, because I think he's done an absolute top to bottom bang up job rallying the troops, taking over the program at the beginning of this, in the middle of the summer, no less, getting all these kids back on the same page, and they are playing absolute lights out football this year. The record may not reflect it, but I think some of those key victories definitely have them right there on the bubble. And of course, again, control your own destiny, win the games you're supposed to win, and let's see what happens come Friday night, and then we'll see how the computer model does its thing on Sunday, and hopefully the Timberwolves will have a shot at getting in.
Yeah,
But Mosley with the district championship, they are a lock right now in Class 4S.
yeah, absolutely. So as we kind of get back to Charles, Mark, we talked about, you look at the top 12, they have the second hardest strength of schedule. You talked about those
Hmm.
opponents that they were bringing in and gave everybody a tough fight. You think about Wakulla. There was only two teams on Wakulla's schedule that even gave them a game, really, them and Swanee. But yeah, Charles, obviously, Mosley, if you think of it in kind of March Madness terms, Mosley had a bid steal when they upset Niceville. I think otherwise, like you said, Mosley's probably in that 10 seat that you see them. Also, you look over on the First Coast, there's still that district that's vacant that hasn't been decided. I'm going through my notes here, District 4. So
Right.
Ponte Vedra, there's a
Hmm.
scenario if Tucoy Creek wins, I think they're playing Ponte Vedra. If they win, there could be a three-way tie for that district, and they would go back to the points. So potentially Tucoy could jump up, or Nice could jump up, or Ponte Vedra could fall back into the mix, all
Hmm.
potentially causing chaos here in
Oh
this
yeah, and
region.
we saw Florida High take on Point of Asia earlier in the year. Like there's just so much here where there's just familiarity in some of these teams here, but there could be a bit of chaos that kind of unfurls when all of this is said and done.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah, I think we ran through everything. So I'm gonna be having my eyes glued to some Friday night football here as we round out the end of the regular season, and kind of keep my I'm not sure how they're doing. I think they're doing it on YouTube, but the FHSA will be releasing their brackets on Sunday, November 5th. We will know who's going where for at least the first couple of rounds, and who has an opportunity at first round bye, and who's going to be kind of taking on their arch nemesis in those opening weeks. So it's going to be great football, Jupe. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm super excited about what's going to happen here in the first round of the playoffs.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's gonna be a blast, Mark. Then we can worry about actual football, right? We won't be talking numbers and other things. We can talk about matchups and some real stuff instead of just all this feels like fantasy football this time of year, the last couple of
Yeah, yeah,
weeks
it does.
here with the points, but it'll be good. And I think, well over 50% of our teams in our coverage area are going to get through into the playoffs. So for us, selfishly, it's going to be really awesome. So really rooting to maybe at least get two, maybe three or four teams hanging out at Bragg when we're talking early December.
Yeah, this is such a good list, and I hate to see some of these teams kind of go home. But it's the nature of the beast, and hopefully we end up some really good football at the end of the year. So that'll do it for the playoff preview show here, and hopefully we'll get a chance to come back on. I think we should come back on next week to kind of go over some matchups, definitely for sure. Once the brackets get released, so we'll see if we break this up into 2 parts here. So this is the playoff preview with my tag team partner for today, Andrew Jupe, and we are 4 Quarters Online. We will catch everybody next week for round 1 of the state playoffs.